5,000 years before Luke Skywalker destroyed the first Death Star, the ancient Sith Empire's golden age came to a dramatic end. Following the death of the revered Dark Lord Marka Ragnos, the Sith people of Korriban bore witness to a titanic struggle between two rivals brought on by the great vacuum of power which Ragnos left in his wake. A staunch traditionalist named Ludo Kresh was opposed by the upstart expansionist Naga Sado in a contest which would decide the fate of the Empire. Sado exploited the arrival of two hapless explorers to mastermind a convoluted plot for control of the Empire, and as an excuse to invade and conquer the worlds he knew lay hidden within the Galactic Republic territories. For all Naga Sado's power, scheming, and subterfuge, his invasion was halted, and he was eventually beaten back by the Jedi and the Republic, who proceeded to hound the Sith forces into retreat. In defeat, Sado exiled himself to Yavin 4, where his dark spirit would endure for 6 centuries before taking on a new apprentice. The fallen Jedi, Freedon Nad. Freedon Nad destroyed Sado's spirit after he learned all that he could, in accordance with the ancient Sith tradition. Nad would go on to claim the world of Onderon, where he ruled and died over the course of the next century. Over the following 300 years, the spirit of Freedon Nad would goad and manipulate the inhabitants of Onderon in various failed attempts to bring about his own resurrection. The tomb, where his physical remains had been interred, became a dark side nexus. Eventually, Freedon Nad's spirit corrupted and twisted the young Jedi Knight Exar Kun, an arrogant though curious former pupil of Vodo-Siosk boss who had come in search of forbidden knowledge and power. As Freedon Nad had destroyed the spirit of Naga Sado in order to claim the mantle of Dark Lord for his own, Exar Kun would do the same after having gained an amulet which amplified the magnitude of his Force abilities. Drunk with power, Exar Kun joined forces with Freedon Nad's surviving acolytes, the former hero Qel-Droma and the sorceress Alima Keto. Together, they made war on the Republic and sundered the Jedi Order in two, causing a great generational shift. Exar Kun ordered his followers to kill their former masters, as he had done to his own. Student against master, the scenario played out over and over again on a massive scale as the actions of the two former Jedi sent echoes across the stars. Though Exar Kun and Qel-Droma had been two of the greatest of their generation, it would fall to their former peers to end the cycle of violence. Nomi Sunrider, a young mother and widow, would go on to benefit from the legendary Jedi Masters Vodo-Siosk Bas and Arga Jeth, the instructors of Kun and Qel-Droma respectively, before receiving her final instruction from the powerful Jedi historian Odan Ur. With the venerable Master Thawne at her side, Sunrider was joined in her fight against the Sith by a number of her fellow students. Among them stood the Cathar Jedi Knight Sylvar. Like Exar Kun, Sylvar had been trained on Dantooine by the Jedi Weapons Master Vodo-Siosk Bas, who had also presided over the instruction of Credo, another Cathar student. Although the Jedi Code would eventually forbid the taking of multiple Padawans, in those days it was not uncommon for a teacher to take more than one student, nor for Jedi to marry or have children. The brash and fiery Sylvar developed a great rivalry with the arrogant though prodigiously skilled fellow apprentice, Exar Kun. She also fell in love with Credo, whom she eventually took as her mate. Her world turned in upon itself when Exar Kun fell to the dark side, for when the offer to join his Sith forces came, Credo answered the call by reluctantly attempting to kill his own lover. Following his failure to kill Sylvar, the coward returned to Exar Kun in abject defeat. At around this time, Kun and Qel-Droma discovered that Alima Keto had attempted to betray the two. With Qel-Droma feeling vengeful toward Keto, and the Republic amassing a powerful fleet in order to take the fight back to the Sith forces, Exar Kun now saw a way to eliminate 3 problems all at once. He placed Credo in a position of command and provided Alima Keto with access to the Corsair, the former flagship of Nagasado. The crystals which powered the vessel could be used to rip the cores from nearby stars, resulting in a devastating attack, as Sado himself had demonstrated nearly 1,000 years earlier. In accordance with their co-conspirators' instructions, Alima and Credo jumped to the Kron cluster, a system consisting of 10 stars. The plan was for Alima and Credo to lead the Republic forces into a trap, before once again unleashing the power of the Corsair upon the enemies of the Sith. Or so Exar Kun had led the pair to believe. Qel-Droma had deliberately provided Alima Keto with faulty calculations, and so instead of destroying merely 1 star, Alima's attack culminated in a cataclysmic multi-star supernova. Her entire being atomized in an instant. In a single glorious stroke, the Sith leaders had rid themselves of a worthless bootlicker, a treacherous witch, and a host of Republic forces commanded by 3 powerful Jedi. The devastating impact of this attack would loom over the planet Ossus, once a lush, cultural, and academic bastion of the Jedi Order, for millennia to come. The immediate aftermath of the attack struck the beleaguered Sylvar with particular force. She had already been forced to look on helplessly as her master had been struck down by her hated rival. Now she had lost her mate. Though Credo had arguably been lost to her even before his passing, the finality of his death rocked her, and would continue to affect her long after the defeat of Exar Kun. Emotions such as love and hate held equal value for the Cathar people, and so despite the fact that many of their Force-sensitive children would go on to join the ranks of the Jedi, the Order's teachings and philosophy often clashed with their natural instincts and cultural identity. A race of predators that hailed from a planet dominated by wild savannas, the Cathar built their cities amidst gigantic trees. The Cathar people dwelled within the enormous trees, which they adorned with elaborate carvings and murals. Epics which depicted great successes, as well as great failures. In the eyes of his fellow Cathar, Credo's story served as a cautionary tale. And while the people looked to Sylvar as their representative within the Jedi Order, she began to feel isolated and hopeless over the decade which followed Exar Kun's defeat, the adoration she received from her people notwithstanding. When 2 members of the Cathar people mated, they did so for life, even in the event of the death of their chosen mate. Because of this, she would never know love following the loss of Credo. She would never have children of her own. Sylvar placed the blame for all this squarely upon Qel-Droma. In her eyes, the murderer of her mate and a war criminal who had been allowed to go free. When her calls for retribution at the Jedi rally held on Ex's station went unanswered, Sylvar took matters into her own hands and tried to murder Qel-Droma on Renvar. It was there that Qel-Droma had been secretly guiding the Jedi training of Vima Sunrider, the daughter of Nomi, who had used her powers to cut Qel-Droma off from the Force just prior to the war's end. Following a protracted lightsaber duel, Ulic Qel-Droma admitted to the part he played in the war which had destroyed Sylvar's life. But he also rightfully pointed out that Credo had made his own choices, as Sylvar would now have to do for herself. Breaking off from the engagement, Qel-Droma deactivated his weapon. In doing so, he convinced Sylvar to stand down, forcing her to realize that by giving in to her emotions, she had very nearly taken the same path he had. In leaving himself open to Sylvar's blade, Ulic Qel-Droma had achieved his final redemption, and opened the door for Sylvar's own. He was murdered shortly thereafter by Hagen, a hapless scavenger and fanatic follower of the Jedi, all too eager to please. Ulic Qel-Droma became one with the Force, despite having been cut off from it for so many years. As Vima Sunrider told her mother, he still had the heart of a Jedi. As for Sylvar, she had finally come full circle, her soul and devotion to the light still intact. Because of Ulic Qel-Droma, she had at last found peace. She had let go of her anger. Credo's fall to darkness had been deeply alarming to the Cathar people, but they took comfort and strength in the resolve of his mate, who remained on the path of light. Sylvar became a standard around which her people felt they could rally, a living legend, a symbol of what it was possible for their Force-sensitive young to achieve. Despite never having children of her own, Sylvar's influence would persist for generations to come. I've made a bit of a habit out of analyzing the impact of the grander stories of the Star Wars Legends mythos by telling the tales from the perspective of supporting characters. As well known as figures like Ulic Qel-Droma, Exar Kun, and even Nomi Sunrider have turned out to be, their names still remaining relevant all these years later, I do find that some characters tend to go either unnoticed or underappreciated by most. One of the characters that my heart really goes out to is definitely Sylvar. The Cathar species is one of my favorites within the Star Wars setting, for several reasons. The point I'd like to focus on for now would be the relationship they tend to have with the dark side of the Force, and how very different it is from the relationship the Sith have with the dark side. The Cathar people are proud and strong, natural warriors, hot-blooded and driven by emotion. During the Old Republic era, they were quite a common sight among the Jedi Order, their species noted as one that had produced many great masters. But the ways of the Jedi did not come easily to the Cathar. The stories of Sylvar and Juhani, another of my favorite Jedi characters, and a fellow female Cathar, who nearly allowed the dark side to dominate her destiny, showed us portraits of two individuals who had experienced traumatic losses in life and had struggled to pick up the pieces. Not egomaniacs or violent psychopaths bent on taking over the galaxy. To depart from this line of thought for just a moment, thousands of years later, it was Mace Windu's assertion that the Sith Lords did not create darkness as the Jedi Knights created light through their actions. In contrast to the way that Jedi spread light, Sith merely used the darkness that has always been there. Greed and jealousy, aggression and lust and fear, these are all natural to sentient beings. The legacy of the jungle. our inheritance from the dark. A partial acknowledgement on Windu's part that on some level the presence of darkness was not only natural, but even necessary. With regard to the Force itself, and the attempt to see it through the eyes of the Cathar people, the writers of these stories created a type of flawed character that I find especially interesting. It's actually more accurate to say that I find these characters more appealing than the sorts that usually struggle with the dark side. The Cathar themselves are not typically tempted by the corruptive nature of power or the promises hidden within the dark that have seduced so many others. Rather, they're simply at a distinct instinctual disadvantage. It goes against the essence of their nature, as well as their culture, to do as the Jedi often preach. It is not impossible for them to overcome these obstacles, but doing so is no mean feat for a Cathar. What Cathar Jedi needed to guard against most was not so much the power of the dark side, which is what almost universally attracts Sith, but rather the more primal aspect of the dark side. There is no real risk that a Cathar will become an all-powerful tyrant like Palpatine, but there is a very serious risk that they will become Gar-Vaster. What I loved about Sylvar's story in particular was that there was no self-serving angle to her brush with the dark side. Her descent threatened to unhinge her, and the presence of malice in her heart cannot be questioned. And at the same time, she experienced all of this in a manner that never caused me to question whether or not she was a good person at her core. Definitely a smaller player in a story driven by more famous names, but still a name that I will always remember. As always, it is my hope that after having heard her story, you will all do the same. Until next time, guys, and may the Force be with you, always.